Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to No More News. I am Adam Green. Thank you all for joining me today, Thursday, December 5th, 2024. The year's almost over, and we're bringing you another big-time influential guest, a heavy hitter, the powerful Keith Woods. Wanted to have him on for a while. He is a writer, content creator, and activist. He is Ireland's most wanted. There's my background music. Ireland's Most Wanted. He's got a new book out. He's the author of Nationalism, The Politics of Identity. He just sent me over the digital copy. I can't wait to read it and discuss that with him today. He was kind enough to have me on his stream to debate some good opponents on Christianity. So it's good to finally talk to him and hear about his new book, and there's lots to talk about. So thanks a lot for being here. Keith, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, Adam. It's good to be here. I know we've been waiting a while to do this, but you had a couple of good debates on my channel. I think it was, if I'm remembering right, it was Tyler Hamilton and Arvol were your two opponents, right?
Yep. Two of the better opponents.
I think the Arvol debate was the one that ended up going on for like 3.5 hours or something, and it just turned into a long discussion on every imaginable topic.
Yeah, we did a follow-up too. He had me on his show, and we did a follow-up. It was cool. He's a cool guy. I like him.
Yeah, I like Arvol.
And just to let everybody know, I like Keith too. I think he's a great follow. I think he's definitely one of the more intelligent guys in the sphere. I'm sure we agree on some things, but I don't think we agree on a lot of important things. So it's good to have you here. And how's the book going?
Well, I mean, there's probably not a whole lot of people you're in full agreement with, so I think it's
you could say that with everybody.
The fact that we've never had a huge like bust up on the timeline is probably that's kind of enough for me, I know.
Yeah, I like and retweet you. We've never had a beef, so we're basically besties in today's day.
Yeah, I think that's as good as it was going to get, honestly. But yeah, the book's going well. Getting good feedback, good reviews. You can see it's all 5-star reviews there. That's helping the sales. And got a burst of early sales. It kind of helped with discovery a bit, which is good because obviously you release something like this, the idea is to reach a new audience with it. And from what I can gather, it's getting suggested to a new audience a lot on Amazon. If you search nationalism, I think it's the top non-sponsored result. Or if you search terms like identity politics. So it's good. That was the idea, get something out there that's digestible, that's presentable for people that aren't fully with us. And maybe they'll pick it up out of curiosity, or maybe they'll be on a kind of red pill journey and it'll appeal to them. And seems to be going pretty well in that regard.
Awesome. Good to hear it. Happy to hear. I'm writing a book myself, so I'm hoping to get some good reviews, and I'm sure I'll have some hater reviews for sure, but also...
Interesting. Is this going to be like a Christianity takedown, or what's the book about?
The Jesus Deception. That's what it's called.
Isn't there a name? Isn't that... who's that guy who wrote the biography of Ted Kaczynski? I think you've talked to him before.
Yeah, Skirbina. Yeah, his book is the...
Isn't that the name? I thought that was the name of his book.
The Jesus Hoax.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Close but different.
Good book,
that's acceptable, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely agree on the main premise, but there's differences, and I'm going into whole lots of different stuff. His is a very introductory, it's a short book, but I need to get him back on, actually. I've had him on a few times, and it's been a while. You should have him on. That'd be good. Or I was thinking also, like, I could suggest some cool books about Christianity for you, and you could do, if you like, as my daughter says, write up one on your Substack. I think that would be cool. I was reading one of your Substacks the other day, the War Ape.
Bring me over to your team.
Well, aren't you already?
Bring me to the dark side.
I've heard you said you're a lapsed Catholic. I read this article. You're talking about evolution. I hear people saying that you're a Platonist, so...
Yeah, you liked the War Apes article, did you?
Yeah, I thought it was cool. Definitely.
Yeah.
And so your book, The Politics of Identity, instantly it makes me think of identity politics, which is like, a term that's got a really negative connotation, especially in the right. Like the idea that you're not allowed to identify as a people with your people. Basically, only white people aren't allowed to identify with white people. Everybody else is like praised and, encouraged to a large degree. So was that on purpose? It's trying to recapture and rehabilitate the image of identity politics.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a subheading for a while. Someone else actually suggested that, and I liked it. I just thought it fit as a nice kind of one-line explainer. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the book, I have a couple of essays in there that is basically a defense of white identity politics. So, I guess part of the book is like kind of me theory selling about like, there's all these kind of academic deconstructions of nationalism, mostly from like Marxist academics, that this is like a 18th century invention. This is like a thing that the elites create to generate mass culture and control people. Or nationalism was this thing that was necessary for the development of capitalism because you needed to have like educated workforce, and you needed to bring people into mass society, and you needed to bring these people together that didn't have anything in common, or they only had kind of local loyalties, and so you invent this idea of the nation state. So these are kind of the dominant ideas in academia. And I've kind of spread from the sociology departments out into the popular consciousness. Like you'll find like the popular YouTube video essayists will kind of spout this kind of thing as if it's super insightful. But there really isn't much to back it up, but there's very few dissenting viewpoints on that. There's very few people that want to defend that in an academic way. Some of it is me kind of theory selling. I have a couple of historical studies like the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire. But yeah, some of it is arguing for the necessity of identity politics for white people in the here and now.
What does it say about that? What do you say about the Roman Empire?
Yeah, so I have an essay called Ethnopolitics in the Roman Empire. So it's become popular. I mean, there's a lot of left-wing historians, especially in Britain, for some reason, this is very popular. They have, I don't know, there's a history, BBC and stuff do a lot of coverage of the Roman Empire, but they like to promote this idea that Rome was this like the first multicultural state, and they'll point to Rome and say, it was just about citizenship. They just had this civic conception of identity. And it's like the perfect example of like nationalism is this new modern thing. Rome was this cosmopolitan empire. So yeah, because I had this viewpoint, some of these examples were curious to me. It's like, okay, well, if ethnicity is something that is important, I think through history and always informs the way people think and act, and race is such a clear reality, then there must be more to this story. So I started looking at the Roman Empire, and you actually find that the idea of race and even a kind of proto-Italian nationalism was always there in the Roman Empire. I was actually surprised, like the extent of it. I was expecting to find that there'd be some kind of like racialism or ethnic hierarchy. But what I was surprised to find was that actually, like in the Middle Roman Empire, they had a clear understanding of what Italians were, and they would talk about the Italian race. And okay, they had different like Italic ethnic groups. You had the Romans, the Etruscans, and different groups. But you find these writers like in the middle of the Roman Empire that are talking about like the racial qualities of the Italians and why they're superior to like the Greeks or the North Europeans. And they also have like a clear idea of, the boundaries of what that is, which is basically modern day Italy. And you find even in like the later Roman Empire, which is supposed to be this super, cosmopolitan, multicultural place, you still have like Roman empires and senators. They're like, they trace their genealogy to show that they're Italian, or to show that they're, even one of like the privileged Italian groups like Romans. So, racial thinking, sense of Italian nationhood, that was always at the center of it. And I realized as well, you can't really understand a lot of the history if you don't recognize these basically racial differences. Like even if you look at the history when Hannibal was invading northern Italy, you find that he's actually making appeals to some of these northern tribes that are under Roman rule, saying, you guys, you Celts, like you're a proud race. You shouldn't have to live under the rule of these foreigner Romans. We'll give you freedom. And you find that every group that joined him and turned on the Romans was like a non-Italian ethnic group. And every group that joined up with the Romans and continued to fight, even when it looked like totally impossible odds, they were Italians. So it turned into this kind of racial conflict of like Italians are fighting these outsiders for their survival, and that's the kind of appeal they're making because, like I said, it seemed like they had no chance of winning. And then you have these other groups that are turning on the Romans, and it's this appeal of like, well, the Italians and the Romans treated us as second class. So, it's like it was like the more I looked into the history, the more it's like not only is this idea that these like pre-modern empires were colorblind and multiracial, not only is that wrong, but it's like race, ethnicity is like central to every aspect of the history. So I thought that was a good example to use to demonstrate the point.
I had a debate with an Orthodox Christian, and he like made a video trying to debunk my points. And one of the things he kept repeating over and over again that was he said the Jews invented the ethno-state and the idea of race, and he kept saying the Roman Empire was multicultural and they didn't see race, and it was the Jews. So he was like, "Oh, if you think you're a pagan and you want an ethno-state, like you're Jewish." That's what he was trying to say, which is complete nonsense, of course, right? What did the ancient Romans think of our ancestors, the Gauls in the Northwest? A different race, a different people? Obviously, weren't they at war for hundreds of years?
Oh yeah, well I did a follow-up one on the Holy Roman Empire about the origin of German identity, and it's kind of interesting because they kind of constructed the German identity out of Roman sources. In terms of like German tribes, there was so many of them, they're so scattered. They're identifying them exactly, how do you do that? And by the time of the Holy Roman Empire, they did have a sense of Germanness. They had the German language, they had the sense that they're a distinct race from French or the Italians, but they went to Roman sources, and uh, Caesar and some of the other writers that were writing about the Germanics. I think it was Tacitus that wrote Germania, right? But he gave like a clear boundary to Germany, and that's kind of the Germans kind of took that and ran with it. And obviously the Romans portray their enemies as much more barbaric, but there was a kind of respect for the Germanics in that, like the warrior culture, the hero culture, the fact that they were so independent and so resistant to.
Did he talk about like families and mono? He talked about families too. Tacitus did, right? And like honor,
Yeah.
their honor and their something.
Yeah, that was the big thing the German writers took from it is like you had like sort of an intellectual project in the Renaissance of these German scholars were trying to intellectually defend, okay, what is the German nation, and they were responding to Italian writers that had this great Roman history to draw on and the great achievements of the Italians. But yeah, the Germans basically took these Roman sources and were like, yeah, Tacitus said that we were heroic, we had this honor culture, this focus on family, and all of the things the Romans might have said were negative about them. That
They were
more
based.
barbaric. Yeah, they flipped that and were like, yeah, this is based. This is more based than the Italians. So it is kind of interesting how from the Roman Empire you get the construction of these nationalities after a lot of it is drawn on those Roman sources.
So I just looked it up, ChatGPT. In Germania, Tacitus says the Germanic tribes practice monogamy, with adultery being rare and severely punished. He contrasts this with other cultures. Strict marital fidelity set them apart. There you go. That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And according to
Kevin
your
writes a lot about that.
Sorry,
the Northern Europeans, that their main strain was like Western European hunter gatherers, and that monogamy was a big thing with them. That like a strict small family unit. That was like the ideal unit for like the harsh conditions of Northern Europe and being hunter gatherers. So
yeah. So I read your whole.
You see these different strands play out.
Right. So this like identity and tribalism, like you'd write about in this article, goes back like the last million years, back to a huge clash with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and how modern man evolved. And you make a good argument that it's through war, communicating through war, being hunters, surviving the winters is another one I've heard a lot. Oh, by the way, of course, you got the nationalism book. I see you just all over the place, like going all over the world to all this nationalist stuff, conferences, protests, demonstrations, and stuff. So you really are like the top nationalists in the world. Right? Do you give
Oh,
yourself that title? One of the top nationalists
I
in the world.
appreciate that.
It's no question.
I'll say one of the top, sure. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's a fun thing if you're
Mhm.
covering this topic is you can equally apply some of it to like writing about the Holy Roman Empire or yeah, pre-civilizational like early hominid warfare,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is actually a very interesting topic because again, it is a place where you find there's a lot of ideology.
Hmm.
I think I even mentioned in that article. It might have been what made me write it originally. Is I was watching this Netflix thing about Neanderthals,
Hmm.
and it's just so ideological. It's like, oh, the terrible like white guys that originally profiled the Neanderthals said there were these aggressive brutes, but actually they were like this harmonic society and probably feminists, and we like destroyed it and wiped these people out. Aren't we terrible? I
Hmm.
even saw something today. There was some academic institution had to come out and like make a statement of academics on Neanderthals to say Neanderthals were a separate species to humans, because apparently there's been a big push from leftists to say that these weren't distinct species, because they're concerned that if you start categorizing these different species of humans, that it like reinforces ideas of different subspecies of humans and basically enforces racial realism.
Right,
So
right. Well,
even in
they
like
say that about
society,
evolution, right? They say if you believe in Darwin, he was a racist, so you're a Nazi, basically. It's what I'll say. And that's another thing is some of the schizo, right? This is no schizo nationalism. People that deny evolution, I think, are basically schizos. If you're saying Genesis is explains creation and not evolution, I consider that a form of schizo. Did you get attacked
um,
for doing an article about evolution?
not really. There was, I
Mm.
mean, there was. You always get a few replies of people
Mm.
like, the world is 6,000 years old or whatever. I mean,
I didn't come from
there
no
was a couple of
monkey.
replies. Yeah, yeah. I saw some of the Un's comments weren't happy about it. Actually, it was published
Uh-huh.
on Un's review.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that was more like it was kind of like boomer anti-Semitism. I don't know how to describe it. They were like, oh, you're describing like Neanderthals as violent stuff. They were like, this is how Jews like describe Goyim, and I didn't even understand the argument exactly. Apparently, like the Jews had invented these stereotypes of Neanderthals that was actually about
I'll
non-Jews or
hear
something.
atheism is Jewish science. That's what I'll hear the Christians say.
Yeah, but as far as like, well, taking Genesis, I mean, I wouldn't call that schizo necessarily. I mean, I think there's obviously you can adopt a religious worldview wholesale, and there's a certain rationality in taking a shortcut on some of these positions and not looking into them. But I mean, yeah, I think if you seriously look into the science, I think it is kind of hard to deny some
Mhm.
kind of
Well, even the
evolution
Catholic
story.
Church
Maybe not
now
the
accepts evolution, right? I believe they do.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I
Mhm.
mean, so someone did take issue with it, but it's like, yeah, the Big Bang was formulated by a Catholic Jesuit priest, right? I
Mhm.
think his name was Lefebvre, a Belgian guy. And evolution, I mean, the Pope, as far as I can get from his statements, pretty much accepts it. I mean, it gets tricky because obviously the fall is very important to Christianity, and that gets kind of difficult if you accept the story of evolution, you only have like a first two humans, so
Mhm.
that makes it difficult. But I mean, at the same time, like the early church fathers and theologians never read the fall literally, and even something like evolution, I'm not sure they would have had such a problem with. Like some of the early church fathers, the fall was this thing that was supposed to have happened before time, and it was this kind of metaphysical
Mhm.
transition, and it explains why people are embodied in the world. So I mean, this whole thing of like, the
Yeah, you have
world
to
is
take a
7 billion.
non-literal approach to it. Otherwise, it's
Yeah, but I mean,
schizo.
this literalist stuff is very modern, really.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
like Luther was one of the first like young Earth creationists. He might have been the first, because even Saint Augustine was saying, well, obviously Genesis isn't literally like 7 days. Obviously, this has
Mhm.
to be read mythically.
Mhm.
So it is funny like how modern it is, and that they're sort of in revolt against science. But it's like these like pre-scientific church fathers and stuff wouldn't have even seen a contradiction there necessarily. So in a weird way, they have like a very kind of modern way of thinking where they're like, well, I have to prove like materially that every word of the Old Testament is true to maintain my faith. Like it is kind of a weird modern like empiricist way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you write about Christian identity in your book?
Um, I did write a bit about birth rates, the birth rate collapse, and what those trends will mean in terms of the growth of smaller religious sects. But actually, recently on my Substack, published an essay titled "Secularism is Here to Stay," and I kind of revised some of the arguments I made around that. And I think, I think people, I kind of concluded the more I looked at it that there's some of the people that have argued, religion is going to have this huge rebound because of conservative people have more kids and stuff. Edward Dutton wrote a book about this.
I've debated
Jewish
Andrew
guy.
Wilson and Arvil about this, the birth rate. That was their
Yeah,
go-to argument.
that Jewish guy that wrote book about what's that guy's name? Kaufman. He wrote the book about like the white backlash to identity politics. He wrote a short book about this as well. The religious shall inherit the earth. But yeah, I got a bit more cynical on that the more I looked at it. I found a lot of the arguments for this big religious rebound are very misleading.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Some of those.
I hope you're right, because I say all the time we need a secularization on the right, because the Bible thumpers, the Christian schizos, the opposing Israel and Zionism with more messianic apocalyptic Judaism that's rooted in a Jewish religion, I don't think is ever going to cut it. So we do need a secular right wing of regular non-schizo people. I say that all the time. So secularism is here to stay. I love it. I hope so.
I mean, one of my basically my main argument is like a lot of the stuff that the like anti-secularization thesis bring to argue that things are going in the other direction are just misleading, basically. And I mean that's the key problem with the whole thing is like all these arguments are basically built on bad data. And if you look at the rates of secularization, it's actually much worse than most people think in terms of, okay, you've European countries where maybe 70, 80% of the population says they're Christian. But if you look at the more relevant things to look at is like church attendance. And you find countries where it's like, 3-4% of people are going to church on weekends. And one example that was always used, and this is what kind of made me originally look at like, well, okay, the secularization thesis must be wrong. These people that say religion is rebounding must be right, is looking at the US constantly books this trend. It's the most modern, most developed place. It's been that way for decades, and yet supposedly on the numbers, super religious. But even that, the more you look at that thesis kind of crumbles. Like, for example, people report in the US that they go to church, like 28% of Americans say they go to church every weekend. There was actually two different studies done on this. One was a huge study that looked at like cell phone data and could actually check how many people were attending church services. And another was a big sociological study that did the same kind of thing, looking in one region, like how many people are entering church. And both of them put the number at around 4 or 5%, which actually puts it in line with Europe. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like on paper, the US seems like this big exception. But then it's like you look at it and it's like, well, 60, 70% of people are pro-abortion, more than that are pro-gay marriage. And the church attendance rate is like the same as Europe. So it's like, okay, on paper, the US is this big exception, but then you look at it and it's like, not really. And you find actually a lot of the religiosity is in these kinds of pockets of more homogeneous communities. And that's kind of an exception to Europe. But in terms of like a mass scale on a mass society, no, actually every trend is going towards secularization in the US as well.
Christianity is collapsing in Europe, and as you say, he just disappeared there for a second. And are you still there, Keith? You just took down the camera?
I'm still here.
Okay, cool. Just want to make sure you could hear me. So yeah, it's collapsing in Europe, especially like in the last 100 years. And you're saying it's also collapsing in America, but there's definitely like it seems like there's a resurgence on the right with Trump and Republicans, and Trump selling his Trump Bibles, and Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and all these big e-celebs. They all promote Christianity as the solution. And Christianity is only really growing in non-European countries, right? But it seems like there's a resurgence. I hope that you're right and it's not. But
Well, I
those.
think I think that's
Huh?
misleading as well. I mean, Trump is like the most pro-gay Republican president ever, right? He normalized being pro-trans. He was even using people's pronouns in the lead up to the elections, and he had to do it because he's a politician. But he took abortion out of the GOP.
Mhm.
At the RNC last year, he took
That
that
was
out of
just
their
to get
platform.
elected, though. Now he's going to bring in Project 2025, probably, and Bibles in
Yeah, but I mean,
schools.
look at how even the I think this was something I mentioned as well. I mean, look at how even the referendums went on abortion, and even like super red states that are,
Mhm.
again, like on paper they're supposed to be like 90% Christian, but they're voting pro-abortion. So it's like when you look at secularization or the question of how powerful religion is, I mean, the number of people that say they're Christian really means nothing. Because what secularization is that religion becomes less of an authority. So, a lot of people have new age beliefs. Like you talk to the average young woman, they'll probably believe in all sorts of like pantheism and reincarnation and karma and stuff, but you still have a secular society because it doesn't really influence their behavior too much. It's just a kind of abstract belief.
Mhm.
So if 90% of people say they're Christian, but then like 70% of the population are pro-abortion and gay marriage, and there's just no rolling back of any of the secularization that's happened in government, it doesn't really mean anything. And yeah, when those things have gone to votes, like I said, even Republican areas have voted heavily in favor of abortion. It's cost politicians that were on the wrong side of that. It's, Democrats put it front and center of their election campaign for a reason. And I don't know. I mean, I think if you just look back at like in 2012 or 2008, you look at like the Republican field, and it was like, the evangelical Christian stuff was really front and center. I think Trump has led to a real decline in that. And even like, you know, Alex Jones, you mentioned him, but like, I don't know, if you listen to him, it's a very kind of like new agey kind of Christianity. It's not like this dogmatic Bible thumping thing. He's also talking about like interdimensional beings on DMT when he's on Rogan and all this kind of thing.
Those are the
So it's
demons
like,
that attacked Tucker Carlson when he was in bed with his 4 dogs. The demon that scratched
yeah,
him.
it's a real shame he didn't get any photos of that, right? The huge demon claws
Yeah.
that he woke up with. No one thought to take a photograph. But yeah, I mean, it's that kind of vibe, even like Candace Owens, like it's this kind of Christianity is like one part of the package, but it's just kind of a part of this whole pile of beliefs. It's very new agey.
Mhm. No, and I think you say Christian, like there's people are voting for abortion and gay stuff. Like I think there are a lot of Christian believers. Christians will say they're not real Christians because of that, but Christianity evolves and progresses and changes. So they still may believe in most of the stuff of Christianity and go to church, and then they can just be accepting of that because that's the direction Christianity is going. But I want to read the super chat real quick. Alabama Yeoman for 100 says, "I appreciate what you do. Take care of yourself and your beautiful family." Thank you so much for that very generous contribution. Keith, you mentioned the stats about Americans going to church. I remember seeing some statistics from the polling, and the more often Americans go to church, the more likely they are to be extremely pro-Israel and anti-racist. And I mean that, like that's not how they worded it, but so it's not even a good thing of people going back to church. If this is dying, we should let it die. And don't be a nihilist and say we can't survive without the Bible. Let it die. Just quit trying to salvage it, and we can move on. Don't you think?
Well, I mean, at the same time, I mean, our kind of politics, like nationalist politics, in my experience, it's about 50-50, like Christian, non-Christian. And I guess the non-Christian is a split of different things, like pagan, atheist, whatever. But certainly, I mean, there's definitely a bigger pipeline to our kinds of politics. Well, not your kind of politics, of course, but like nationalist politics in general, of people that are conservative, traditionalist in temperament, and they tend to be Christian more. I have seen those statistics. They're kind of blackpilling, honestly. If you see like the rates of like pro miscegenation and just basically like anti-racism of religious Christian people, it is kind of blackpilling. But at the same time, those people that are kind of out of lockstep with the modern church, a lot of those people are attracted to our politics. So I know you're all about alienating the Christians. I don't really agree with that, but the kind of broader trends you're talking about, unfortunately, do exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I'm just for telling the truth. I think we need to put the Hebrew fairy tales behind us. They've been disastrous, and we're in the predicament we're in largely because of that. Look at the clash throughout Irish history of Christians versus Christians, Protestants versus Catholics. That unnecessary.
Yeah, but that's really a proxy. I mean, that's really an ethnic conflict. You know, that you have Ulster Scots settlers in the north, and you have Irish nationalists also sharing the island with them, and religion became a proxy there. I mean, religion in a certain sense, like in scenarios like that, or in like the collapse of the Balkans, it does become a proxy for identity and like a way to strengthen identity.
I think it kind
So
of
those
it also
places like
weakens identity though, right? Because we're all one, we're all brothers in Christ. Like we have the controversy with this Christian guy that was calling out one of your friends and saying he adopted or fostered like a black kid or something, and they're like, oh, that's what a real Christian does. You're against that? Oh, you're not a real Christian. Like most Christians are colorblind, and especially
yeah, I mean,
today.
in times of like racial ethnic conflict, religion becomes a proxy for identity, and you can get this more like hardline approach to faith. Like I said, with the even like the Balkan conflict, like you have Croatian Catholics, you have Serbian Orthodox, and then religion suddenly becomes like a lot more important to people because it's along this tribal division as well, and losing your religion is like basically losing the fight to this other group. And in that case, it can be like sort of a healthy, sort of masculine expression. But yeah, I think it is. I don't necessarily agree with the thesis that like Christianity necessarily led to liberalism in this colorblind society we have. Like I know Richard Spencer would make this argument, but I think certainly like once you're there, it's difficult to then argue for return to a racialist way of seeing things when people have the Christian idea of the universal dignity of man, because and again, but my sympathies are with the nationalist Christians on this. I'd like to support them in making that argument. But obviously, you do see a lot of trads where we're siding with that guy and saying, well, yeah, if the scripture, they're arguing that the scripture is on his side and that the black children being fostered have the equal capacity and dignity of the white children. So yeah, that equality thesis is certainly a barrier for a lot of people. But like I said, at the same time, people that are of the temperament to be like traditionalist Christians tend to be attracted to our politics more.
Yeah, I would say that they're heretical, not real Christians. They're not if they're not putting Jesus first, then I would say, but we can agree to disagree slightly there. I want to ask you,
is that a bad thing though? I mean, we're kind of already at the point. I mean, I'd share some of your criticisms as it goes for the Old Testament. I think the worst kind of Christian sects are the ones that are basically they kind of bring back the Old Testament, in a way. Like it was better when Christians weren't reading the Bible and the Catholic Church was just interpreting it, and it was much more New Testament, Jesus-centric. But it's like the more literalist and the more Old Testament centric you get, the more like Jewish in character.
That's the problem. You can't get it's Christianity. The Christian identity is inextricably linked to Judaism and the Jews and the Old Testament. And like you said, you agree with the criticisms. Christians will only criticize the Talmud, but they won't criticize the Torah, which is like the root.
Yeah,
of...
but I guess where I disagree is I think like most Christians already. I think if you talk to the average Christian, they kind of have a way of explaining away the Old Testament or making sense of it in a way that it's kind of metaphorical or it's secondary to the New Testament. And I think, like most Christians, if you talk to them, it is much more New Testament centric, Jesus centric. That's different in the U.S., of course, because you've all these evangelical, upstart, like literalist churches, and they're heavily like Bible bashing Old Testament. But yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to kind of like, I guess, Marcionite reading of Christianity. I think like if Christianity was just the New Testament, I feel like we would never have had the same crisis of faith in the West. I feel like even a lot of young people that get attracted to like Buddhism and Eastern spirituality, like you kind of have that like universal teaching there in the New Testament. But then where people trip up is you have this much more like Bronze Age morality in the Old Testament, and stuff that seems much more mythological in character. And I think people struggle psychologically trying to fit those together. And you kind of go two ways. If you either kind of go this new agey, like, well, Jesus was just like a nice guy that was preaching love and peace, or you go this weird like biblical literalist Protestant thing. And I think very few people kind of fall in the middle on that increasingly, especially as you have everyone reads now and can choose their own religion and stuff. But yeah, I think any issues I have would be some of the Jewish mythology in the Old Testament more so.
Well, I mean, the New Testament is Jewish mythology too, based on the Jewish mythology
Well,
of
yeah,
the Old.
this is your argument.
Well, it is. I don't think it's not my argument. It's what the vast majority of all Christians believe, like without questioning. But let me shift gears a little bit. I don't want to get into a theological debate with you, but I do appreciate you for having me on to do those debates. I saw you had a Substack about your case for Trump. It might have been somebody else's case that you were summarizing.
That was an interview. That was I was interviewing
Right.
Hunter Wallace. So I let him make the big case for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how convinced my audience was. A big part of his argument was like, we need Trump to win so he'll like get off the stage and he won't run again in 4 years' time and we can just be done with him.
That's a funny angle.
That was one of his main arguments, but I felt like he wasn't. I was like, no, come on, Hunter. Like you wanted to win. Like, come on, give me the real reason.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I also saw you had an article thinking that saying that Trump would lose if he didn't change something. I had thought Trump was going to win for so long, and he's going to come in and be another huge Zionist again. What do you think? What's your overall view of Trump's nominees? And he hasn't taken office until another month and a few weeks, but it's already looking. How is it looking in your view so far?
Oh, well, I did a podcast on it recently, and I said I think it is going to be the most Zionist administration in history. I think it already is if you look at
That's
it.
what I've been saying.
Yeah, and it's bad in a couple of ways. I mean, one is just the fact that, how like extreme these people are. I mean, Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, like I don't think there's ever been someone in that position that has those kinds of beliefs in terms of like he's full like Armageddon, like we need Israel to conquer all this land and bring about the end of the world. Like I don't think anyone has ever with those beliefs has been put in that kind of position.
It's an abomination to appoint somebody like that for that position.
It's crazy. I mean, he won't use the terms for Palestine. He won't use terms of Gaza. He won't use like terms for locations within the West Bank. He'll only use the biblical terms. It's really like insane stuff. And the thing that he advocates for is Israel literally like expelling every Palestinian, like just complete ethnic cleansing. And this is the guy they're sending as ambassador. And then Trump also recreated this position that he gave to Jared Kushner, special envoy to the Middle East. And the name escapes me right now, but he just appointed this like Jewish banker, real estate investor to
Hick Smith or something like that. He had no experience at all.
Yeah, it's just he organized Jewish donors to support Trump, and so he gets this position. Mm-hmm. So it's bad in just how Zionist it is, but I think it's also bad in the fact that like when the Biden cabinet was appointed, it was the most Jewish cabinet in history, but they weren't expecting Israel and Palestine to kick off, right? That was kind of a frozen thing. Mm-hmm. I think they were expecting that to basically just go on as it had. And then, suddenly Israel is like front and center for a whole year. Everyone turns on Israel. Everyone is, on the left and many on the right are frustrated with how much their governments are supporting Israel. And then you just have this like flood of noticing, where it's like, okay, well, Blinken is Jewish and Victoria Nuland and all of these people down the list. And that was getting to be a real problem for them because obviously the left wants to uphold this, it's just Zionism. Especially like during the Bush years, it was like, oh, it's Christian Zionism. It's because George Bush believes in this Gog and Magog stuff, and the Jews are just like pawns in this, right? It's these like Texan oil barons and evangelical Christians. But that was getting really difficult. And even so, a lot of leftists that were always, well, I'm just an anti-Zionist, Jews are against Zionism. Even a lot of leftists were like, okay, Blinken is going over to Israel saying, I'm coming here as a Jew and we're going to give you unlimited support. Like, it was getting difficult for them to have a good cover story for all this stuff. It's like, you're going to tell me, like, Jews have no power and they're just pawns of evangelical Christians. But then I look at the cabinet and it's like 50% Jews and all the foreign policy positions are Jews, So people were noticing. But now it's like, yeah, we're going to see the horror in Gaza. Trump is threatening the biggest response ever if the hostages aren't returned. And we're going to be seeing all the stuff we've seen for the last year. But now it's going to be like, oh, well, look at Trump's cabinet. There's no Jews there. It's all these white.
Well, there is. There is a few. Christians. Charles Kushner is the Kushner's dad is going to be maybe the ambassador to France. There's Stephen Miller.
Yeah,
there's Lee Zeldin.
Well. But yeah. There's a few, but it's not the glaring overrepresentation where you could flash up the chart of Biden's cabinet and it was like.
Yeah, the Christian Zionists in his cabinet are almost more worrisome. Like Pete Hegseth, who's talking about rebuilding the.
Worse, yeah.
Our Secretary of Defense. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, compare Mike Huckabee's statements on Israel to like Blinken. Because Blinken, at least with those kind of leftist, like internationalist Jews, they understand how it looks. Like their people are, elite liberal Democrats. They understand there's this kind of tension of like we're supporting this Jewish religious ethno-state, and they have a certain way of selling it to make it palatable, and they know to pay the right lip service to Palestinian statehood and to present the U.S. as this kind of neutral arbiter. I mean, it's not believable, but they can put a certain gloss on it. But compare that to Mike Huckabee, where he's like, well, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. And, they can just go and live in other Arab countries, and Israel has to take all that land so we can fulfill biblical prophecy and bring about the end of the world. Like it's
and they're God's chosen people, and that's the Holy Land. Like literally believing that and saying that and acting on it. I mean, let's go. There's Gorka just got announced, ultra Zionist, counter terrorism czar. Gorka Zionist in Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Adelson puppet, always been a Zionist. There's Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security. She signed that bill ensuring the protection of God's chosen people. Elise Stefanik at the UN.
As well.
Yeah, she wanted a nationwide. Now, the head of Homeland Security wants anti-Semitism laws. They're pushing this IHRA definition everywhere. Elise Stefanik at the UN, another hardcore groveling Zionist. Pete Hegseth.
Wasn't it Stefanik that did the big thing with the heads of the universities, getting them to condemn River to the Sea? That was her big claim to fame, right?
Yeah, she tweets every day about the hostages as well, and went over and groveled Netanyahu after October 7th. The big one, Pete Hegseth, the Department of Secretary of Defense, is in Israel on film saying he wants to rebuild the Turd Temple. You like how I did that?
Well, you should love that one, right? Because he has, I don't know if you saw, he has the tattoo on his arm in Hebrew, and it's the Hebrew for Jesus. I think it's Yeshua, right?
Oh, I didn't know he had a Yeshua. I know he had like the Jerusalem cross, like the Jerusalem Crusader cross, and the Deus Vult also. But I didn't know he had Yeshua on there.
For Yeshua, which is like, it is so perfect because it's like, he's the religious Christian that's in the cabinet. He's the super religious Christian. And it's like, it doesn't even make sense to get that in Hebrew. Like, Jesus wasn't speaking Hebrew or anything. So it's just like the total, like, Jew worship front and center. It's crazy.
Seeing if I can find that one. I wasn't aware that he had Hebrew. Are they going to show us a picture on here? Jerusalem
I know
cross.
One of those Israeli publications did a thing on it.
Yeah, Yeshua. He's called it Yahweh. He doesn't even know the name of Yahweh. Which you saying? Okay, wow.
I think he got it done in Israel, did he? I thought I read that somewhere.
Yeah. He got the tattoo in Bethlehem, Jesus' birthplace, located in the present-day West Bank, where he was reported for Fox Nation. You know, the Christians that lie about me all the time, when I went to Palestine in 2018, I went to the Church of Nativity. It's an Orthodox church with Orthodox Christian priests in West Bank. Christian tourists line up there to touch where Jesus was supposedly born. With my group, we got to cut the line and go like through another door and see everybody touching the thing. And I said, oh, we got the backdoor hookup at the birthplace of Jesus. These Christians circulating that, spinning it, that I said I had a Jewish hookup. And it's literally the birthplace of their God. So just some of the schizo stuff out there that we see, of course. So
did you encounter much like when you're in the West Bank? Is there much Israelis kind of keeping you separate from Palestinians or like surveilling you? Because I've kind of heard that they don't want you to see exactly how Palestinians live. Did you experience that?
They have checkpoints before you get in to the West Bank. But and there was like military vehicles that would like drive through real fast. They would kind of like invade for a little bit through Ramallah, which is the Palestinian capital of the West Bank. But it wasn't like that big of a deal when they did that. At least when I was there, it wasn't that big of a deal. Nothing.
Did you see
no shootings or anything? Did it what?
Did you see the Wailing Wall? Did you go into Jerusalem?
I was up on a street like far away up above it, but I didn't go down like inside of it. I think you have to wear a yarmulke to do that. And plus my Palestinian tour guide was apparently like viewed as a terrorist or something. So I don't think they would let him into the Jewish areas.
There's never going to be a leaked photo of you like kissing the Wailing Wall.
No, I got one right here. Actually, I went to the mosque. Here's another way the Christians lie about me. There's a photo of me that I posted when I got back of me in the Cave of the Patriarchs, which is the mosque in Hebron, where supposedly Abraham and some of the patriarchs are buried. And they say that's at the wall. So they're just complete liars. But I did make a fake me at the wall.
Well, when did you go? I mean, were you already kind of sus on Israel at this point? Or what was your feeling?
It was real early, like once I was on YouTube, like having anybody notice me. So I was like, I'm still like relatively unknown and not viewed as a terrorist, also an American citizen with American passport. But in 2018, to 6 years ago, I was even more unknown. So made it through, although it was a risk.
What? At that point, were you?
I was, but like, I was new on the scene, basically. I wasn't written up in ADL and other things like I am today. But here it is. For all the lying Christians that want to lie about me, there's your proof. Me at the wall. And it's AI for the idiots. They're going to try to take that out of context like they will for the schizos. So, Third Temple, you think that they're really like these religious fanatics? You've seen the rabbi clips. You've seen this Christian Zionist cabinet. Possible war with Iran, which they also believe is an end times war. Annexing Gaza. What do you see in the next 4 years? What's your predictions?
Oh,
nothing's gonna happen.
Difficult.
I already know nothing's Mr. Nothing's gonna happen, right?
Yeah,
I hope you're right.
It's hard to predict with Trump in office because it seems like he is just going to give them literally everything they want. And if that's the case, it's like, well, what is Israel going to want to do with Iran if it has complete U.S. backing? I guess that's really the big question for the next few years, because there has been kind of a default there. I mean, even since this war kicked off, there is this thing where they do the big response and they fire missiles and then they do a big response back. And Iran does something kind of just to save face. It launches these missiles, no one really gets killed. There's maybe an airbase somewhere has a rocket land on it, and it's kind of a face-saving thing. And it's in their benefit to drag things out as much as possible because they know what's happening to support for Zionism in the West. And, obviously they're working on these weapons programs and so on. So, it seems like Israel feels like they're against the clock and that this has been like a concerted strategy to deal with all of these threats, to secure their north, secure Gaza, to deal with Iran. And if that's their plan, if that's what the effort is, if they feel like there's a short window to do this, well, they're never going to get a better opportunity than the Trump administration and the most Zionist cabinet ever.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely wouldn't be confident in a nothing ever happens prediction. Because I'm sure there's going to be some kind of direct U.S. strike on Iran at some point. Trump killed Soleimani. Just how much will they escalate is the question, I guess. I mean, what's happening in Syria right now is really unexpected as well. And I think there's probably direct Israeli-U.S. involvement there as well. But the speed at which the Islamists are advancing, it's not looking great for Assad. I mean, he'll have the the Russian air support and so on. But this seems to be a bit more centralized and a bit more organized than some of the offensives in 2012, 2013. So I don't know. I even saw there was some of the Islamist commanders were on Israeli TV. I don't know if you saw this going around. They were crediting Israel for. They said their strikes on Hezbollah were a huge help to them, and this offensive wouldn't have been possible without that air support. So that was kind of a funny thing to have going around. You have these extreme Islamists like praising the Jews, praising the Zionists.
Noahides, good Ishmael Noahides. I want to ask you, shift gears again. I've heard you're a Platonist. Is that true? And also, do you know Uber Boyo? He's another Irish lad over there.
Mm-hmm.
I was on his show a couple months ago. We talked about the Torah being fake and fabricated in Alexandria, Egypt, and based on Plato's noble lie. Have you heard that thesis that the Judaism and then by extension Christianity is rooted in Plato's noble lie?
I've heard that there's a thesis that it was based on Plato's laws, a lot of the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
It was actually Arval told me about this. He recommended a book on this. I've yet to read the
Gomurkin,
book,
probably.
I know a guy.
Mm-hmm.
What's the name? Yeah, that's
Russell
it.
Gomurkin. Yeah, he's the one that does that.
Yeah, I never did get around to reading that, but I've heard that thesis. But yeah, no, I would describe myself as a Platonist. I mean, I guess I'm, the kind of broadest possible term is I'm an idealist philosophically, in that I think, consciousness is the ultimate substratum of the universe. I don't believe in like subsistent material matter. I guess I'm not a physicalist as such. I think consciousness is the ultimate fundamental. I think Platonism is the best kind of metaphysical system that makes sense of that and gives like a coherent cosmology to that. I am familiar with Uber Boyer. I had him on my channel actually for same as you to debate Arval on Christianity. No, actually, funny you mentioned it. It was actually Platonism versus Nietzsche, but of course it turned into a big Christianity debate.
Yeah.
As those kinds of debates tend to.
Are you a Nietzsche guy too as well? That's something else I had in my notes here to talk to you about.
Not quite, no. Nietzsche was like the first philosopher I read. He did kind of set me off on. I think like the questions Nietzsche asks are probably more interesting than his answers, and that the idea of Nietzsche is kind of light a fire in you and send you off on intellectual quest to deal with them, kind of throwing your whole worldview up in smoke. So I guess he influenced me, but I wouldn't say I'm a Nietzschean, no.
Mm-hmm.
He's
got some really good quotes about Christianity. Uber Boyo's a big Nietzsche guy, and Spencer. By the way, I'm doing Spencer's podcast tonight, partly to talk about that Ben Shapiro clip that you had that went real viral. I don't think we'll probably have time to talk about it today, but tune in to Spencer for that, for our hot takes on that one.
You're gonna have your book out before Spencer's and Brahmins. Their one has been in the work for like 5 years. And we've both got our books out. What's going on?
Yeah, mine's been delayed as well, so it's a little bit of a sensitive subject, but hopefully it'll be done soon.
When did you start on yours?
I mean, really 5 years ago is when like the research that's going into it kind of began. But writing, it's been 2 years pretty much. And it's about done. I just got to finish it up. Maybe when we're done, I might have a couple. Excuse me?
Do you know what the word count is?
If I've got it separated on different documents still right now, so not the complete. I haven't been paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nietzsche's got some awesome ones. You who hate the Jews, so why do you adopt their religion? That's the banger. Also, this one too. He says, wonder what you take on this one. Uber Boyo's awesome. Did you see his video, speaking of Roman
I'm just
Empire?
going to knock off my camera for a sec. I just need to get a light.
Okay. Uber Boyo had that video. Christianity was the woke movement of the Roman Empire. I'm curious if you saw that one. It was pretty epic. That's when I first had him on. And
I don't think I saw the video. I remember him writing a big thread. Maybe it was just a big post on Twitter about that.
Mm-hmm. So here it is. Here's Nietzsche. That Israel must itself deny the real instrument of its revenge. So Jesus, the Messiah, is the real instrument of their revenge on Rome and the Gentiles before all the world as the mortal enemy, and nail it to the cross, so that all of the world, all the Goyim, namely all the opponents of Israel, could unhesitatingly swallow just this bait, and could spiritually, subtly imagine any more dangerous bait than this. That's nails it. And one more. This is precisely why the Jews are the most disastrous people in world history. They've left such a falsified humanity, the Torah and the New Testament, in their wake that even today Christians can think of themselves as anti-Jewish without understanding that they are the ultimate conclusion of Judaism. Some of the are you okay? You know, some of the schizo stuff I see that I think are non-starters and counterproductive and a dead end is like the Christian copes that saying Jesus wasn't Jewish and the Jews aren't the real Jews and Christianity didn't come from Judaism and, you know, stuff like that. Does that frustrate you at all as much as it does me?
Well, I mean, I think arguing Jesus was non-Jewish, like ethnically, is definitely a non-starter. Yeah, I think you really have to be kind of reaching into the schizo anti-Semitism basket to justify that one. But at the same time, I am sympathetic to the idea that, like, you know, the teaching of Jesus is basically a complete repudiation of Judaism, which puts me it's at odds with like an Orthodox Christian interpretation, but also at odds with the totally anti-Christian interpretation. And that,
but hold Jesus, on. Okay, go finish. Sorry, I won't interrupt you.
Yeah, well, I think this is something Nietzsche didn't recognize, and that he saw the ultimate expression of man's highest consciousness as just this kind of like expanse of will, like an ultimate like animal consciousness, like ultimate domination. But that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of circular. There's no hierarchy there. I think there's like a hierarchy of consciousness. I think the teaching of Jesus is very much in line with like what we call the perennial philosophy or mystical teachings from other parts of the world. Mm-hmm. I think the story there, to me at least, is, you know, you have in the axial age, you have these teachers like Buddha and other spiritual teachers that bring this new form of spirituality or religion that's like individual focused and focused on like the liberation of the individual, higher consciousness of the individual, and not just a kind of collective command structure, polytheism. I think like Jesus was preaching a doctrine that was coming from that kind of place, you know, forgiveness and universal love. And I think that was like a total repudiation of the beliefs of the Jews and what was found in the Torah. And, you know, I think there's something kind of poetic about, I don't know if Erval made this argument to you or Uberboyo, but yeah, that there's some kind of grand irony that he incarnates in these people that view religion as purely like Schopenhauer said the Old Testament is like a race war manual for the Jews. People that view religion in this purely kind of instrumental way, and they're expecting this violent prophet to arise and destroy the Roman Empire and give them ultimate worldly goods, and instead they get this Jesus preacher. So
yeah, but it's still the Messiah. It's still the Jewish Messiah that theologically conquered the Roman Empire for the God of Israel and the Torah. So I see that still as a victory. And look at what it's led to today. It outlawed paganism and European gods, which was like, I don't see Christianity as the ultimate repudiation of Judaism. I think it's the fulfillment of Judaism. The whole core.
But don't you think that could have gone the other way, though? Like, what if, you know, like there was all these expulsions of the Jews, and at times, you know, with the like Inquisition, at different times they were treated pretty badly. I mean, what if they were just expelled out of Christian Europe, and you know, they never would have got this foothold in the first place? Like, it just seems for them to have that foresight that like in 2 millennia this will
I
collapse
don't think they
to
had the
this
two
is some
millennia
kind of
foresight. I think they call audibles and it changes how they go, and it's a meme that picks up and has a life of its own. I believe a messianic Jewish prophecy meme, but like the ultimate goal of Judaism was to have the nations not worship their idols and worship the God of Israel. So Christianity worships the Messiah and the God of Israel, which
so
was
what do
the
you
whole
think of
objective.
like some of the early interpreters of Jesus were super anti-Jewish, really. Like I mentioned, like Marcionism. Like Marcion was like he's like super anti-Jewish in terms of like the fact that they worship this Old Testament God that's like a complete repudiation of everything Jesus teaches, and even in Saint Paul as well. Like Paul makes some kind of pretty
He says they're the
anti-Jewish statements.
oracles of God, and that they're the root that supports the Christians. Like you can find, it's polemics. It was a schism. It's one Jewish sect arguing over how to be the right type of messianic Jews. So in that degree, the
Yeah, but
fact
I
that
mean,
Christians agree that the God of Israel is the one true God, they believe in the prophecies, the power of the prophecies. They believe that the Jews were once chosen and they're bowing down to the Messiah that was always meant to conquer the nations. So I don't see that as like it's not opposition to Judaism. It's fighting within Judaism, but it's still messianic and
what do
apocalyptic
you think of
Judaism.
like when they dug up the Nag Hammadi scriptures and they got all these Gnostic gospels, and a lot of these were like the first interpretations and some of the very earliest texts on Jesus. And they even say Marcion might have that. Well, no, he did. He compiled the first canon, where he had the letters of Paul and he had a shortened one of the books. Some
Luke.
people actually argue he probably yeah. Some people argue that Marcion was the first gospel, that the Luke was actually his, and that he's the Q gospel that they were copying from. That's an interesting thesis that's out there. But like, what do you think that you have all these Gnostic writers that they had a very different, it wasn't like, oh, the Jews set the seeds and then Christ was the fulfillment. It was much more like, the Jews were following a totally evil path and the Old Testament God was quite evil and Jesus was a complete repudiation.
Well,
Yeah, it just
they
seems
don't
a
all
bit
say
like,
that. Not all of the Gnostic texts say that. Like the Gospel of Thomas doesn't have that. It's in just like the New Testament and Paul and the Gospels,
Thomas is like very mystical, isn't it? Like it's sort of just
yeah,
Jesus's teachings, right?
the sayings of Jesus. Yes, it literally says like
Yeah.
you're written about in all of the prophets, like showing that they were searching the scriptures and created basically a fan fiction fulfilling prophecies. Let's see. I've got another 10, 15 minutes with you or so. So let me get to some of these super chats. Information Domain says, question for Keith. Do you have any worry in regards to too much nationalism causing another war in Europe? Should people adopt a European identity instead of avoiding it?
No, I don't worry about that. I mean, you talk to nationalists in Europe. I mean, people aren't super motivated by like want to reinvade France and take back Alsace or something. I mean, there is a kind of pan-European consciousness there with most nationalists that they recognize. I don't think it's the correct reading of either of the two world wars to say that they were caused by nationalism.
Okay.
That's a whole other thing. But I don't think that's the. I don't think that's. I think if there was a respect for basic principle of nationalism, it would have avoided the two world wars, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said pan-Europeanism. Did you see the tweet of Pamela Anderson people have been
Yes.
circulating since Myron attacked her? She called for some type of like European identity. What do you think of Myron saying how she hit the wall and is how white women age so poorly? It's
Well,
just
it was
bait,
bad. It
huh?
was a terrible
Trolling bait.
example to make.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bad example to make his point. Yeah, I mean, the idea of the wall thing is supposed to be like single women that have run out of data market options, and I think she has like 2 or 3 kids or something. So it's not the best example. She was a big supporter of Julian Assange as well, wasn't she? I think
Yeah,
she was like staying with him in the embassy when he was locked up in there.
right, right. Keeping him company as only
Mm.
Pamela Anderson could possibly. Um,
Yeah. So she's yeah, I guess she's some kind of leftist of some sort, but I guess kind of more maybe more old school leftist.
yeah, I think she could use a little makeup, just a little makeup, and she'd probably be hot again. She doesn't have to go over the top, but um, hey, what's up with the pump cover, man? How's the weights going? I saw a picture of you the other day, and everybody talked. I said, "Who is this guy that ate Keith Woods?" Because you're a young guy, you're a tall guy, but now what are you hitting the gym now, becoming a base Chad nationalist,
I
completing the
am.
look? How's that going?
Yeah, I'm finally going to do it, so I can't lose arguments on the internet from people telling me to post physique anymore. That's what really convinced me to go. Yeah, no, it's
Good.
going good. I gained,
Good.
I think I've gained like 30 pounds this year.
Wow.
And then I have a crazy metabolism. I was away traveling for a couple of weeks, and when I came back, I'd lost like 2.5 kilos in that
Yeah.
time. So I really have to work hard against. I'm like I can't relate at all to people that are fat, because my
Mhm.
natural thing is to like eat one meal a day and be like my lowest possible weight. But no, it's been going pretty good, and I have yeah, it definitely is kind of rewarding in itself to get into
You're
going to the
addicted.
gym.
You're a
But I
gym
hate
bro
to.
addicted now. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean that's the worst aspect of it is I hate to kind of prove the gym bros right that were telling me to lift for years. And I just was not doing it out of like
Yeah.
resentment to them. So I'll try not to talk about it too much on the timeline. I'll try not to start giving people health advice.
Yeah, you could turn into a bodybuilding account. That'd be funny.
Rebrand to self-help account. Yeah, maybe.
You'll be the new golden boy. What's his name? Golden Lion. To be
Golden
the
one.
golden
Yeah.
rye, the nationalists.
I need some product to sell though. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to think of a.
Creatine, dude.
I'm gonna
Sell
have to
creatine.
think
Are you
of
on creatine?
one product, like one like magical product that saved me. Yeah, I am taking creatine, but
Yeah.
it has to be something a bit more quacky. Like some kind of like tree root or
Right.
some kind of rare flower or something, and then I can just sell bottles of it.
Yeah. Deer antler oil or something.
Something like that, yeah. Yeah, something masculine sounding like that, yeah.
Okay, ABX89 says the God of Israel is a mythical figure created to encode and justify the destructions of all other nations. The non-Jew who believes in the God of Israel is a fool. The non-Jew who preaches the God of Israel is a traitor. Thank you, ABX89. You're the man. Drum and bass. Oh wait, hold on. Drum and Bass World says, "What does Keith feel about the nuanced anti-Christian actions some people from the 1930s took?" Yeah, that's a big debate. Were the 1930s Germans pro-Christian or turning against Christianity and pagan? What's Keith's view on that?
Um, yeah, there were religious Christians within the NSDAP. Goebbels was a religious Catholic. I think Hermann Goering, I think he was Catholic. He was definitely Christian. Um, but uh, I Yeah, I don't agree with people that say Hitler was a Christian. I think that's just wrong. I think what this comes down to is they deny that table talks are legit. But from looking into that, I mean, every historian seems to affirm the table talks. Even people like David Irving affirmed them. And any argument I've seen that the table talks are fake seems to be basically just like basically National Socialists that want Hitler to be pro-Christian, and they have an issue with the statements he made about Christianity, and or else statements he makes about other whites. Like he makes a lot of disparaging comments about Slavs. He talks about basically turning Ukrainians into a slave race after they've conquered Ukraine and Russia. And so obviously this doesn't jive very well with people that think Hitler was just like peace-loving, like pan-European white nationalist or Christian nationalist or something. And that seems to be the two kinds of people that deny the table talks, but I've never really seen a good case for why they're fake. It basically just comes down to people saying, well, it doesn't sound like him. He would never say this. I know him too well. So I think if you take the table talks as a legit source, and also people that knew him closely, I think he definitely was anti-Christian in his view. He wasn't like an esoteric German pagan or something. He had a pretty basic like Enlightenment view of things. I don't think he gave a great deal of thought to like metaphysical questions or anything. But yeah, I think definitely it was trending in that direction. I think if they stayed in power and they consolidated power, I think it would have trended in a more and more anti certainly anti-clerical direction, and there was already signs of that with like the positive Christianity and stuff. So yeah, I've always thought people kind of twist themselves in knots trying to be like pro-Christian NS type. I think you have to manipulate stuff a lot to make that work.
I
I usually
agree.
go to public speeches he made where he says, he's a believer in God, but again, it's like he's talking to an audience that's like 99% Christian. It's like, of course he's going to say that. You
Exactly.
can't really treat like election appeals as like this is his true beliefs. And then all the private correspondences and what people said about him in private, that's all fake. That's all Jewish lies or something. I never found that convincing.
I don't think it all hangs in the balance of the table talks either. Anyway, there's lots of other sources and quotes to see.
That's the clearest one. But yeah, even if the table talks were fake, I would still be pretty convinced that he was anti-Christian just based on other. Yeah.
In regards to the table talks, Richard Carrier, he's like the top mythicist in the world that did On the Historicity of Jesus. He researched the table talks as well. I thought that I haven't looked into it for a while, but I thought he said that they were real. But a comment here said that he said that they weren't real. Are you familiar at all with that? His take on table talks?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think it's him. Or maybe it's possible it's him, but I know a book came out like 2 or 3 years ago because I know the guy who's an academic was actually engaging with some people that were debating this on Twitter and stuff, and he argued that they weren't a reliable source. But I read some of it, I looked into it, and even his claim wasn't like a hard this is all fake. He didn't believe any of this stuff. It was much more like, well, with the different translations this passed through, it can't really be treated as a primary source where you can say like, word for word he said this, or you can treat like any single quote or page as like, okay, this is the truth, this is what he believed. In other words, like you have to treat it with extreme skepticism because an individual aspect of it could be mistranslated or misleading. But even with that, that's kind of like a weak thesis against it. But even with that, you would still assume that like the bulk of what you're getting is basically what he believed, right? It's like, okay, maybe you can't treat an individual statement as he said this, but there's a lot in there that's super anti-Christian. I think that's clear.
Yep. Lisa Renison for 5 says, to Keith, your book is on my list. Awesome. It's on my list as well. I need to pick up some good nationalist talking points. There it is.
Lovely cover there.
How long did it take you to write it?
A year, basically. I mean, the good thing was, it's an essay collection, and a couple of them they're just for the book, and I wrote them for the book. But it's good. I was publishing them as I went on Substack, so that was a good way to still be putting out content as I was writing. I couldn't just take a year to like stop doing content and write a book. But yeah, about a year. I guess I was hammering out like an essay every 2 or 3 weeks.
Cool. We got a question in from Uber Boyo. He says, most important question, who is taller, Adam or Keith? I'm 6'4".
I'm 6'4.5", 6'5". I'll say 6'5". So I think
And blue eyes too.
Yeah. Do you have blue eyes?
I do, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Very blue. Can't tell? Not contacts for the schizo Christians.
Yeah, but you see, I don't have the Jewish name like you. I saw people in the comments explaining that you have a totally Jewish name, so I guess by default, I'm the more
That's what they say. It annoys me so much when people say that. All you got to do is Google it, and it says it's primarily an English, Irish, Scottish name. And you also Google it. It says only 5% of Greens are Ashkenazi. And I've got my DNA results out there. There's no Ashkenazi. English, Irish, Scottish, German, Nordic. Keith knows.
No, I think I've heard more English people with that name than Irish. Yeah, there was I have heard. Yeah, there was an Irish football player that had that surname, but I think I've definitely heard it more with English people.
Yeah, only 5%. 1 in 20 Greens are Jewish. So it's just it's so annoying. These people.
Like, how do Ashkenazi Jews adopt? Was that just them like anglicizing something that was more Jewish, or how does that happen?
I think they just like copied it to fit in, or they just adopted colors just because like colors was a common word or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But it's just so annoying, you know, the schizos out there. Like, I put out all this information, I'll debate people in good faith, and then my points and my information and my arguments almost never get addressed. It's just, you know, personal attacks and slander and lies. Which I'm sure you disavow those type of schizos. Yeah, welcome to the internet. All right, here, a couple more here. And Drum and Bass World says, Carrier said that the table talks are unreliable, but that they're not fake. Michael Nilsson also wrote a book on it, but admits they are real, just unreliable. Tick History has a fantastic...
that's what I thought, yeah. I guess it probably was Carrier that wrote that book then. And yeah, that's, like I said, you know, people say, oh, you know, they'll point to someone wrote a book that the table talks aren't legit. But yeah, it's like your super chatter said there. They say it's unreliable. You know, you can't just pull out a quote and say, you know, primary source, Hitler said this, we know for a fact. But they never say they're fake. They say, no, this was, you know, it was correspondence that was written down. You know, it's likely reflecting the sentiment that's there, but okay, you can't take a single statement out of it and be like, this is Hitler said this on this day. Yeah. So it's a much weaker thesis than, you know, the people that say Hitler was a religious Christian pan-European that loved all whites equally and loved Jesus, and the table talks are fake Jewish lies. It's not quite what they say, you know.
Yeah, there's so much other evidence too that shows that they do align with how he was probably talking at his table.
Yeah.
Table talks, talking at his table. Okay. ABX89 says, excuse me, Plato said that an astronomer, excuse me, I got something in my throat, cannot learn anything about the stars by observing them, but only by thinking about the stars. Republic Book 5, he rejected objectivity. Platonism is the philosophy of prejudice and arbitrariness. Any thoughts on that?
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think I don't think you can get that from an isolated statement. A lot of the you know, a lot of the people behind the scientific revolution were kind of influenced by Platonism. Actually, there was kind of a rebirth of Platonism, like the English Platonists.
Well, Judaism and Christianity, I believe, were too.
On the you mean Platonism influenced Christianity? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Arvold talks a lot about that, actually. I mean, the church fathers kind of just adopted wholesale, like, Neoplatonist metaphysics and just applied, applied Christianity to it. I mean, there's a lot of suggestions that some of the church fathers, like Pseudo-Dionysius is a famous one, and then Thomas Aquinas quoted a lot from him. He influenced him a lot. I mean, there's a lot of suggestions that he may have just, like, basically plagiarized Neoplatonists like Proclus. But I mean, even, you know, forget plagiarism or whatever. I mean, that basically is the story. You know, they just did adopt Platonism kind of wholesale.
Mm-hmm. Well, Keith, I want to keep this relatively short just so people are more likely to click on it. We could always do this again sometime in the future. Why don't you tell everybody the best places they could find you? Or if you have any final thoughts or questions you wanted to run by me, since I was doing all the questions tonight.
Well, I enjoyed this. You can find all my stuff, bio.link/Keith Woods, active on X. KeithWoods.pub is where I publish. And yeah, buy my book, Nationalism, The Politics of Identity. Leave a positive review. There'll be lots to keep you occupied here, lots of different topics that you'll be interested in, and lots of different sources you can follow, get super educated on all these different topics.
Oh, and your podcast, Woodstown also, right?
Of course, Woodstown. How could I forget? Yeah, if you go to woods.town, it'll take you to my Rumble channel.
You like what I did with... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even notice you had you've Greenwoods, yeah.
Greenwoods.
Maybe if I fire Paul Town, we can make that happen.
I could be your new host.
Weekly on Rumble and X. We do like a weekly review of what's been happening on Saturdays. But if you follow me on X, you'll find everything I got going on.
Cool. And I have been following, and Keith is clearly one of the most non-schizo, intelligent guys in the sphere. Yeah, I thought Greenwoods went nice, kind of like Woodstown. Flows off the tongue.
That one works.
Just a couple Irish lads out on the countryside.
Yeah,
Yep.
so we already have a title if we ever start doing a regular show.
Yep. All right, guys, we'll
Maybe
check
your
out his
book will get
book.
me fully. Maybe your book will get me fully on board. Maybe we'll be doing a weekly show
Dude,
after I read your book.
I'll send you the audiobook. I'll send you a copy for the full Woods Green Pill session. I think you're already basically there. I mean, could you agree with the premise that Christianity is Jewish and largely fictional, made up stories? Like all the miracles, all the 300 prophecies that were fulfilled, like it's obvious they knew the prophecies and wrote a story fulfilling the prophecies, right? Not a magical superhero did all of these miraculous things, right? So if you agree with that, you're basically already there on the
Well,
level.
I'm more cynical about the Torah, but I don't think I have your same interpretation of Jesus. I think I'm much more like a kind
Arvel,
of
you're still I
New
gotta I
Agey
gotta take
Christian
Arvel's
America.
grip
Yeah,
off
I'm
of
I'm kind of
your head, your
Arvel type.
brain.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
work on Arvel again. I'll have to have him on and try
Yeah, you'll have to
to
do another debate and do
yeah.
a little less.
Once I win him over, Keith will follow, maybe. No.
Yeah, you're gonna have to take down the Marcionites and the Gnostics.
Oh, the Marcionites. No, I do need to get in. I was just watching a debate the other night about did Jesus exist, and the yes person was arguing from a Marcionite perspective, and they're always in my comments, giving me a hard time. Oh, Big Tech says he has a super chat. Sorry. Okay, he says last question. Sorry, Keith. From Big Tech, my buddy Big Tech. If secularization is rapidly increasing and worse than people think, is it subversive to associate white identity politics with Christian nationalism and Catholic fanaticism, since it will annihilate the non-believers and the secular people? Good question. Good question.
I wonder, I wonder who that super chat is about, or what movement that's about.
I have no idea. I can't think of anybody.
Well, no, not necessarily, because like I said, there is a group of Christians that are more traditionally minded, that are open to white identitarianism, and I think like it's obviously, I'm sure he's directing that against the Groypers, but I think it was quite successful what they did in terms of being able to challenge the conservative movement from the right. And there is a background Christianity to that whole conservative movement that if you're just not participating in, I guess you don't have the same rhetorical force as when, they could challenge someone like Charlie Kirk and say, well, you're supposed to be a Christian conservative movement. Why are you promoting like Rob Smith and these people? So, no, I don't think it's subversive, but I think there has to be a place for, non-Christian nationalist movements as well. I think especially in Europe, it is much more secular. It's a much more secular environment. I think the politics has to be kind of its own project. And if you try and run a nationalist movement in Ireland or Germany or France, and you say we're going to like install a Christian government, that is a road to like 0.01% or something. It's just not really going to get off the ground unless there's a huge cultural shift. That's the thing, is like people sometimes say, well, need a Christian nationalist politics. It's like culture just isn't with that right now in Europe, and they would have to, it's some things I think can't. There's only so much you can do with politics, and that kind of change in terms of like bring back a traditional society or something. That's like what was the quote from Heidegger? Like only a God can save us now. Like that level of cultural change, I don't think can be downstream from small upstart political movements.
Jack the Ripper says, God damn, I love Adam Green. That is so nice of you to say that. Love you too. Zionist Cuck says, the Arvel debate was amazing. Fuck the Abrahamics. Hail Asatru, the one true faith. It's time to visit Uppsala, my brothers. Thank you, Zio Cuck, as always. Little Bit says, a person with a color name may adopt it from the color of their lord's crest. Interesting. Or like a slave adopts their slave master's name. All right, cool. That is all. Appreciate everybody for support. Great talking to you, Keith. Finally, happy to finally do it. Probably way too long. I'm a bit of a procrastinator, and you're such an intimidating guy. I just didn't know if I was ready for the for Mr. Woods, but appreciate you. Wish you well. I look forward to what everybody has to say in the comments, and I will see you guys again probably tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Keith, thank you. And if you could stay on the line, I just want to say bye to you during the outro. All right.